answer? Sure. When in conflict, environmental protection should be valued as more significant than economic growth. Today, the affirmative team believes that protecting our world's environment rather than its economic growth is more important and beneficial for society now and to our future generations. The Law Dictionary defines the phrase environmental protection as environmental guardianship based on policies and procedures. Valuing environmental protection as more significant deals with many topics, and four of which are deforestation, water pollution, overfishing, and bycatch. Bycatch is defined as the capture of unwanted sea life while fishing for other species. This too is a serious marine threat and causes the needless loss of billions of fish, along with hundreds and thousands of sea turtles and other sea animals. Just these three crisis issues happening today in today's society are already having a major impact on the Earth. It is estimated that 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from deforestation, according to the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. The main cause for deforestation is agriculture, and the main cause for forest degradation is illegal logging. We're losing 18.7 million acres of forest annually, equivalent to 27 soccer fields every minute. Forest degradation occurs when forest ecosystems lose their capacity to provide important goods and services for people and nature. According to the Environmental Center at Yale University, although the U.S. reportedly had a GDP per capita of about $70,000 in 2018, Switzerland beat the U.S. with a higher GDP per capita and a higher EPI score. Despite the U.S. having a higher overall GDP, the government's lack of attention to environmental issues such as deforestation and GHG emissions put the U.S. behind other developing countries such as France, Germany, Italy, and Canada. If you look at China as an example, they are a huge economic power, but their citizens are struggling from health issues because of poor air quality emissions. If we are to keep up this economic growth, we are risking the health of all of our American citizens. Every day, 2 million tons of sewage and industrial and agricultural waste are discharged into the world's water, the equivalent of the weight of the entire human population. It is estimated that 63% of global fish stocks are now considered overfished. Overfishing leads to an imbalance of ocean life, severely affecting the natural ecosystems in the process. The damage done by overfishing goes beyond the marine environment. Billions of people rely on fish for protein, and fishing is the principal livelihood for millions of people around the world. These are just three out of many environmental problems which I do not have the time to talk about the rest of them today. These three environmental crisis issues is what we should focus on heavily on, even more than economic growth, because these are affecting the health of humans and animals and the planet we live on. According to the World Bank, the formal timber sector employs more than 3.2 million people and generates a gross value of over $600 billion each year. In 2016, the commercial and recreational saltwater fishing of the United States generated more than $212 billion in sales and contributed $100 billion to the country's gross domestic product. These two major job industries bring lots of jobs and are in really big numbers. If we do not start taking more of an importance on the environment, environmental protection, then we will eventually lose these jobs in the future, and the economy will begin to suffer from the loss of money these jobs bring in. There will be no more trees for our world. Our oceans will become barren of fish. This would be very detrimental to our health of the environment and the health of all living organisms. If we come together and stop thinking so much about the economy growth and realize that environmental protection is more important to our future generations, we will be able to live on a much cleaner and safer earth.
The economy is the start and end of everything. You can't have successful education reform or any other form of reform if you don't have a strong economy. That's David Cameron. In accordance with the former Prime Minister, our team must negate, when in conflict, environmental protection should be valued as more significant than economic growth. With much research in region, my team has prepared an argument that validates why we negate the resolution, and we offer these definitions. According to the Cambridge English Dictionary, economic growth is defined as an increase in the economy of an area, while the economy is defined as the system of trade and industry by which the wealth of a country or region is made or used. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development defines environmental protection as any activity to maintain or restore the quality of environmental media through preventing the emission of pollutants, or reducing the presence of polluting substances in environmental media. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines conflict as opposing action of incompatibles, and according to the Oxford English Dictionary, significant is defined as significantly great or important to be worthy of attention. Our first disadvantage, economic growth provides for equality and the expansion of opportunity while environmental protection does not. Economic growth allows for the reduction of poverty. The challenge faced by African countries such as Ghana is to maintain this high economic growth rate in order to finance a number of developmental projects and curb the rampant poverty. Because economic growth reduces poverty, it must also reduce the wage gap and even out the distribution of wealth. The main idea of the trickle-down effect is based on the accumulation of wealth. Accumulation of wealth, generally generated by the rich, is thought to be beneficial for the poor because of transferring increased wealth from the rich to the poor. When more capital is accumulated, more funds may be available to the poor. The accumulation process does not just trickle down from the wealthy to the poor and gives rise to a steady state wealth distribution. Our second disadvantage, the prioritization of economic growth allows for increased quality of life and innovation, while environmental protection leaves the world impoverished and unable to create a future. Innovation is one of the most prominent benefits of a growing economy. It contributes to the betterment of consumers, businesses, and primarily the economy as a whole. Essentially, innovation creates jobs, which leads to personal income and thereby the overall well-being of humans. Economic growth allows for a higher quality of life, including a healthier people and a more efficient healthcare. Over the past 2 centuries, economic growth has significantly improved the average standard of living humans. According to Hess Peter, economic growth has the power to enhance nutrition, and individuals who take part in eating nutritious foods are better equipped to fight bacterial diseases as well as overcome unexpected illnesses. Secondly, when experiencing economic growth, governments are allowed the freedom to invest money towards more effective public health services. Environmental regulation, which is replacing price and entry controls as the most prevalent form of government, regulation is growing. The benefits are largely private goods, despite the way in which the policies are described. The problem arises because of the lack of balance in who pays for these policies and who values the benefits from them. Advocates who are proficient in the political arena give more and pay less. General citizens who are much less proficient get fewer policies they value and pay more. Due to the lack of competitive lobbying, where all interests are represented, too little information is presented on the true costs of environmental regulation. According to Gary Livecap, who is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution as well as the Bren Professor of Corporate Environmental Policy. The prioritization of economic growth provides the opportunity for equity of resources throughout the economy. With more financial means, we can bridge the gap between impoverished and the wealthy through the creation of jobs. As the economy grows, poverty decreases, improving the quality of life presently and in the future with less worries about financial stability. Individuals will be able to feel free to be creative and intellectuals. The diversification of labor occurs in centralized societies in which labor has been divided due to stability provided by surplus agriculture. This stability leaves room for medical, military, scientific, and innovation. Without innovation, we would not have the high quality or ability to maintain our current environmental or scientific programs of the ecosystem or biological health of the natural beings. In conclusion, economic growth provides faith in the future that both sides are fighting for. These parties are interdependent parties with high priorities of protecting human beings. However, when in conflict, financial stability, quality of life, equity of resources, and innovation comes first, as it is the human nature to provide for oneself first before it can look outward. Poverty takes far more lives than climate change every year. How can we save the world if we can't save ourselves? Ignoring the state of homeless and the poverty in favor of saving the bees is an insidious oversight.
Crossfire for 3 minutes.
Any of us can ask questions for us today?
Who gets to start? Do we start the motion? Okay. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about this issue. So the first question I asked was, y'all talked about deforestation, correct?
Yes.
And you said that a lot of the deforestation that happens because of illegal logging, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Also, did you have a definition for economic growth?
Yes.
Can you say that for us? Sorry.
Economic growth is an increase in the capacity of the economy to produce goods and services compared from one period of time to another. It can be measured in nominal real terms, the latter of which is adjusted for inflation.
Okay, thank you. Also, you talked about overfishing, correct? And how it creates a loss of biodiversity. correct?
Overfishing and bycatch.
Okay. And
Was that a question?
no. Sorry, I was getting to my question. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. You said it's the livelihood for many people, correct? That fishing is a livelihood for many people, correct? Okay, thank you. That's it.
So the affirmative has cited two industries, fishing and timber, correct? So do you believe that economic growth provides diversification of labor? Do you agree that it actually occurs?
Yes, but that is also due to us trying to focus on environmental protection, which does produce that labor. It is not just us focusing on building more infrastructures, creating more land, more other areas just to have, say, another factory or open up another mine, which is what Donald Trump is also insinuating right now for his, one of his political, I don't even know the word, pushes. So what we're trying to say is that due to environmental protection, we are going to be helping not only our earth for us to be here longer, not just to see like, oh, a person next to me is able to get $2 more versus being able to live for at least 2 more years because they could not drink the certain water because it is too contaminated, or that they aren't able to eat certain types of fish, sea life, any sort of forest animals, because there will be none left that we are able to consume without us having to produce our own, which is also going to destroy our environment because that also ruins the area that we already have. By introducing different types of animals, even if it is just a salmon pond, you are going to be harming all of the insects, all the animals that already have been there and have already been established. That also brings down to our
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is it there?
The second speaker.
do you have a motion?
Sorry.
Yeah, I know it's fast. Okay, so the opposition here, they mentioned trickling down wealth to the poor, even though majority of the wealth that does accumulate through GDP, any sort of industries, any sort of companies, they do not trickle down to the poor. It mainly stays with the people that are already in power, already rich, because what do they care? They live in high rises, they're already up there, they do not look down and go, well, there are dirty people on my street, let's move them out. They think that is their way of actually being able to improve their style of life, and that's also mentioned by one of our philanthropists. I believe his name was Hillis Weiss. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, he is Swedish, but his idea of environmental protection is to improve everybody's life. Just because on this earth now we are focusing on ourselves. I do agree with that, that is very important, but being us by ourselves does not mean we should exclude everything and everything else. We should not exclude our environment, we should not care less about the trees because we do need to build more houses. That is great, that is amazing. But we are able to use other ways of building those homes. We do have other ways of creating more infrastructure, creating other businesses, such as we mentioned before, there are many types of companies that do just aim specifically for taking care of the environment. One of the companies mentioned here is their main focus is just to cater to deforestation and logging. Even though it is something that is so expensive and something that is necessary, they also are aiming to protect it by holding up to 50% of the land, being able to pay for those people to take care of those trees, take care of that environment, make sure nothing there is destroyed, make sure none of those illegal loggers are roaming in, trying to take down what they can, what they need. As well as, let's see, One of the company's Millennial Development Goals, the international community committed to having portions of people without access to safe water and sanitation by 2015. Meeting this goal means that 322 million working days per year are gained, as a value of nearly in US dollars $750 million, which is wild, because without those people, such as in the state of Michigan, we don't have those workers. And as another side for like healthcare, an annual healthcare sector costs a saving of $7 billion. The total economic benefits of the MDG target is estimated to be $84 billion. That is a lot of money. That can help people. We are making money. We do have ways to actually fund those things. Things like sanitation and drinking water investments have high rates of return. People do not care because they want something more firm, more efficient. Even though for every $1 invested, there is a projected $3 to $34 in development return. 1 to every 34. That is a lot of money for someone who doesn't have any. For someone who does need something to drink. Economic losses due to lack of water and sanitation in Africa, as an example, is the result of mortality and morbidity impacts, and is estimated to $28.4 billion, or about 5% of GDP. They are just lowered because they don't have it, that they don't have it there at all. And then speaking upon what just recently has happened, as you all know, the Notre Dame has burned down. Within 3 days, all around the world, people donated over $1 billion to rebuild the Notre Dame. Bernard Arnault, head of companies like Louis Vuitton, donated 200 million euros. That is about 213 to 15 million euros. The Notre Dame is an integral part of France, is what he said. Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo also announced $50 million, which is about $56 million in donation from the city of Paris themselves, while the regional government agreed another 10 million euros. In 2024, Paris will host the world of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. We do need everything we can so that the Notre Dame is returned to all of its splendor for that occasion. Even though the city of Paris itself is ridden with trash, I believe about 34% is already in like the subway systems where they are only able to sleep there, live there for a quick second before they have to move again. Davis Harris, who is the chairman of Rockefeller-Lansing Commission, a couple of years ago pointed out that we have in fact used up our quota and then some of our environmental resources, and we borrowed from the future. And we are not able to go back from paying the damages.
I'd like to start by addressing that illegal industries of any kind are not actually a part of the economy. So for evidence to that actually has nothing to do with economic growth. Furthermore, impoverished people, the humans that you are speaking on, are actually a part of the environment that you are actually fighting for. Therefore, their quality of life is actually important. 80% of the world is actually below the poverty line. Majority of people live under $2 a day. So therefore, the diversification of labor, the actual economic growth, and the equity of resources that we are fighting for would help these people. And it would actually improve their social cohesion and the benefits to overall community. As we are fighting for innovation, community, and quality of life. The affirmative would like to ignore the people at the bottom in favor of animals. However, how can we save these animals if we cannot save ourselves? You quoted something about Notre Dame. I would like to say there's no relevance to the actual economy argument and environmental protection that we're speaking on. Also, healthcare, fishing is a livelihood. Are we asking these people to stop providing for themselves? Are we asking for these people to stop eating and caring about their families in order to, what is the goal? I would like to ask that. Poverty rate in China is 85% to 15.9, which is over 600 million people. And I would say that the majority of their economy is based on fishing. And are we asking them to stop feeding their citizens? Are we asking for us to ignore the overall issues that these people face as they are a part of the environment that you are seeking to protect?
We have another 3 minutes.
I can,
So whenever you say that Notre Dame does not have an economic impact, even though there is $2.46 billion worth of it from jobs, tourists, people just going there to take a picture of it, it does have an economic impact. It is so minuscule though, because I am a Catholic, I do believe in it, but also it's a building. I do get upset because $1 billion was released just to fix that versus one billionaire, Heisel West, he donated $1 billion of his own dollars to funds for locally funded ways to protect the environment. And he was planning on doing that within a 10-year span. But because of what he saw, he felt so disheartened that he donated all in one go. So that is a huge impact because none of these companies, whenever they hear the Flint prices, they all turn away. They're like, it is not my problem. It is not apparently my business, even though I sell products to them. People in Flint, Michigan, they know what Louis Vuitton is. They knew who Laura Mercier is. They don't care. They never provided, even though all you have to do for them, they donated over each of those companies over billion or $100 million. Versus whenever like that happens, they don't even send like a grant. That's crazy. Because they have so much money and they don't give it back to the people who are buying their products, who are supporting them, even though they don't have enough to live.
Is there a question?
So what I would have to say to that is, how are individuals being brought into this conversation when we're talking about nation states of the world? As the CEO of Louis Vuitton, correct? Is that what we're speaking on?
We're speaking on the head owner of
Head-
the entire.
Of the entire company. Yes, so he's an individual who had an individual emotional response to a crisis that he saw fit to actually engage in. So, how does that have any relevance to the world economy that he doesn't have to step in?
But this is also a part of, this is his world. People are living in these worlds. He does go to all these countries. He does go to actually Africa. He does post about it. He does talk to companies about it just to get those kinds of leathers, materials. He gets inspiration, ideas from those people. But whenever there is a crisis, he blinks and he does not look back to provide back into the environment that he is continuously taking from. Those leather bags are not just coming out of the ground. They are taking from animals that have been living, that have been trying to be protected. They are in withhold, but he's just pulling and pulling.
Okay. As Africa is a continent, which of the 58 countries are you speaking on that he has to actually visit?
I believe Madagascar, Congo, and then I'm not too sure on the rest that are in the lower portions. I'm not too strong on geographical.
As Africa is not in any relation to the Notre Dame, how is that part?
To summarize, if we don't pay attention to our problems with deforestation, water pollution, and overfishing, then our Earth is going to suffer along with our economy. Without a sustainable environment to work with, there will be no jobs or economy to even fix. By bringing focus to these problems, we can create even more jobs for the unemployed and improve our economy. However, if we choose to ignore these problems, then the damage that is done will be irreparable and it end up costing us even more money that will be detrimental to our economy and debt. Let's review some of the main points on why we should focus on these topics. When we cut down the trees, we eliminate our source of clean oxygen. For instance, with the Amazon rainforest, we have already depleted 17% of the original forest we started with. Most of this deforestation can be contributed to cattle ranching, which only adds more to the air pollution problem with all of the methane emissions. The Brazilian government attributes 38% of the Amazon's deforestation to cattle ranching. Instead of prioritizing cattle production, we could also look, or cattle production of genetically modified cows, which are unhealthy, not to mention. We should instead look for other methods of food production, such as 3D printed meat that is cheaper, efficient, and economic friendly, or environmental friendly, sorry. With 3D printing, we will be able to mass produce healthy meat alternatives and save our forests at the same time. To add on, with 3D printing, we will also make more of a profit and save time compared to the traditional cattle production method. If we are being specific, bioengineer CMT says that this technology will reduce time and manufacturing costs by 10 times. Just to give you a mental image, this will allow for printing a 100-gram piece of steak within 30 minutes, which is a lot less than raising cattle for years and years and years and then not having enough meat to feed everyone. Like I said before, this method will also help save land and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which the methane gas emissions from livestock currently account for 14.5% of the current total man-made greenhouse gas emissions. Furthermore, cattle at the moment use 30% of the global arable land and 25% of the world's water. So with 3D printing, we'll be able to save both of these resources. If we continue with the current system, in the future, there will be little chance of having these resources to distribute food to everyone. Furthermore, if y'all were looking to build more land, most of the land that we have is unfit for construction and will only lead to the downfall and add more to air pollution, water pollution, and so on. Another main reason we should implement more environmental protection is because with a polluted environment, it will be hard to attract any tourists to our country. Take China as an example. Although they are an economic power, China's citizens suffer from their poor air quality. Plus, tourists don't even want to go since it can be hazardous for their health. Not to mention, the air pollution is so bad that their citizens have to wear masks on their day-to-day basis. This is something that we do not want for our own citizens, so if we start making changes now, then we will be able to prevent this and save the health of our citizens, which will also help with our health care, because we know in today's age, a lot of people are struggling with that. Lastly, we must not forget, in order to grow into an even bigger economic power, we must also invest money into environmental protection. By improving our EPI, we will also see an improvement in our GDP, as seen with Switzerland, who is currently ahead of us with a higher EPI and GDP per capita. Currently, we are not number one for economics or for our environment, but by improving the environment, we can pass the other countries and become an example for developing countries to take care of the planet. Most importantly, we must remember the health of our people. Currently, unsafe or inadequate water, sanitation, and hygiene cause approximately 3.1% of all deaths worldwide and 3.7% of disability-adjusted life years worldwide. Another scary statistic is that 7 million deaths are contributed to air pollution every year. By funding programs such as the Breathe Life initiative, we can cut this number in half. This is a program that aims to mobilize cities and individuals to protect our health and our planet from the effects of air pollution.
So to start out with, you talked about, in your construction case, you talked about deforestation and pollution with illegal logging, and that has nothing to do with the economy and economic growth, which therefore should be struck from the flow because it does not have to do with the economic growth. In fact, it hurts economic growth, which is exactly what we aren't addressing. Additionally, they talked about GDP and EPI scores, which wasn't even their definition of economic growth, because when I asked, they talked about the capacity of the economy to grow in through job opportunities and other things, and not about GDP. And we also defined it as not only GDP. And so therefore, that should be taken as irrelevant to the case. Also, they said overfishing is the livelihood of many people, and that's why it should be valued, because it provides the livelihood for many people, not because it's biodiverse. And as much as like biodiversity is good, it's because it provides livelihood and helps economic growth. And that's the reason that we should protect it. See, we're fighting for economic growth fully with job opportunities, and we even defined it as an increase of the economy in the area, of any area, especially with the value of goods and services. So since that attributes to the global economy, then that should be protected, and I agree with you on that case. But it shouldn't be protected because of it provides environmental protection, but because it provides economic growth. Additionally, they talked about only the United States, which we've been talking about the global economy as a whole, and so we've been talking about how it reduces poverty and how it has to do all over the world, but all of their policies had to do with Donald Trump and the U.S. specifically, which we're not arguing for just economic growth in the U.S., we're arguing for global economic growth, and that's why it's so important, because as much as this economy has grown here, the economy needs to grow in third world countries, because people are dying because of it, because they don't have money to provide for their kids. See, when people are too consumed with providing for their kids, they're not going to worry about buying a $1 extra straw to help the environment, because we have to focus on economic growth because it provides for the protection of people. Also, I would like to talk on their point on pollution. And we said that because economic growth can help the environment, because technology is the key. If we develop technology which creates a more effective source of energy, but without pollution, this would create a higher output and reduce pollution. So, because of pollution, we can provide for a reduction of pollution by economic growth, because it provides technological innovation. And also their point on environmental growth helping the economy, then they're not in conflict, and then we're not even debating the resolution, because we're only talking about the resolution of when they are in conflict. And so because those advances help the economy, we should focus on those advances because they help the economy. And so therefore their arguments should be moved to our side, because they're arguing that they work in tandem and not when they are in conflict. And so since we have provided much more evidence on the equality, the equity of resources, the quality of life and expansion by economic growth, and global economic growth, their points should be moved to our side, and this should be another reason why it should expand our case. Also, in our case, we talked about the health advantages of that healthcare industries are able to grow through those technological advances to combat any healthcare detriments because of the economy. And so I don't think that economy and environment come in conflict a lot, but when they do, we have to prioritize economic growth. Even my opponents talked about 3D printing as a way to provide for people, but that's through technological innovation, and through economic growth, not through environmental protection. And so, all in all, their arguments, none of them have refuted, and so that's why we must negate the resolution for the protection of people, equality, and equity of goods. Thank you.
So first of all, are you ready? So first of all, I would like to thank the negative side for coming out and debating this with us, and for our judge for listening. So firstly, I would like to mention that GNP and GDP are in our definition of economic growth and therefore should continue being in our argument. Also, third world countries are a result of the first world countries polluting the air, and this is seen through countries like Switzerland and India becoming warmer due to pollution. Now, the negative side that deforestation and logging has nothing to do with economic growth and should be stricken from the argument. However, this is untrue because illegal deforestation and logging definitely does contribute to economic growth through things like the black market and therefore putting illegal money into the systems of the world. The negative side is forgetting that overfishing will eventually make it so that there are no fish left to catch, and they also never took bycatch into account in their arguments and therefore should continue remaining in the argument. We questioned the relevancy of their mentioning of trickle-down economics, and the negative side failed to mention the relevance to the argument. As for our arguments, we had multiple appeals to Pathos and Logos, which should be considered when taking into account that our arguments were indeed very effective. The negative side is missing the fact that money going into one place can have economic effects all over the world, and that expands to environmental protection, which also can be affecting the entire world from one place. The negative side has failed to mention possible alternative routes to both sustain the economy and boost the environment, and as such, their argument of deforestation and logging having nothing to do with economic growth being stricken, as well as them mentioning that overfishing boosts the economy, should be stricken from the argument. Clean environments reduce illnesses and reduces the need for expensive health care, and it also attracts business and tourism. So therefore, environmental growth does indeed affect economic growth, and therefore coincides with our revolution, or with the resolution that economic growth is indeed more important than, or environmental protection is indeed more important than economic growth, as environmental protection has a positive impact on economic growth. So we must invest money into environmental protection. It'll help boost our economy, and it'll help boost the world and keep it all a safer place for all of us. Thank you.
I would also like to thank the affirming team, our judges, and our audience for coming and listening to our debate today. In summary, our team proved that when in conflict, environmental protection should be valued as more significant than economic growth. I also wanted to point out one of the fourth speaker's points. The black market is not a part of viable economic growth, and they still not address our points on equality and equity. Now, wealth distribution is still on our side because we have more reliable sources from an economic professor instead of a philanthropist. We clearly provided and cited credible definitions for our economic growth and conflict to clearly present our case. Our opponents' definitions were not clearly stated by their first speaker, which made it difficult not only for us but also the audience and judges to understand what exactly they were arguing for. We define economic growth as an increase in the economy of an area, especially of the value of goods and services the country or area produces, and we define the conflict as competitive or opposing actions or incompatibility. Now, restating our conclusion, economic growth provides space in the future that both sides are fighting to see. These parties are interdependent parties with high priorities protecting human beings. However, when in conflict, financial stability, quality of life, equity of services, and innovation comes first, as it is human nature to provide first for oneself before looking outward. Now, poverty takes far more lives than climate change every year, so how can we save the world if we cannot save ourselves? Now, as stated by David Cameron, the economy is the start and end of everything. You can't have successful education reform or any other reform if you don't have a strong economy. We deserve to win this debate because one of our opponents' contentions were invalid. In relation to the second speaker's point about illegal industries in the economy, illegal industries are actually not a part of the economy, let alone economic growth, therefore they should be struck from the flow. Now, our opponent's response to the debate was rooted in emotion rather than fact. Ethos is an effective piece, but not when it conflicts with relevancy and fact. Now, the comments made regarding the leader of Louis Vuitton was essentially inapplicable to the resolve, being that we are focusing on a global standpoint. Now, the second speaker stated that she was upset about the Notre Dame burning down by the response of donors, which was done voluntarily. The economy is in reference to global trade and illegal industry, and the acts of one man outside of politics of a formal nation is not the concern of the global economy, as it's the whim of his personal finances. Our opponents failed to address any of our points on equity and equality, while my team and I covered all the points they addressed during both Crossfire and our speeches. Our deontological approach to economic growth is viable through our contentions, equity of sources, and innovation. With all these things in mind, we can also conclude that when in conflict, economic growth should undoubtedly be prioritized over environmental protection. And as I said before, we must prioritize the well-being of our own species before we can extend the help again. Thank you.
Can I get a show of hands if you believe the AF has won this round? If you believe the NAG has won the round, please show your hands.
That's crazy.
And then it kept going.
Y'all, I'm gonna keep going with that.